Welcome back to Debut Writers, the podcast for writers. If you've ever stared at a query letter wondering why it's not getting responses, or worse, getting form rejections, this episode is for you. Today on Debut Writers, I'm joined with senior literary agent Amy Nielsen, and she's pulling the query letter completely apart, line by line, sentence by sentence. We're talking about what makes literary agents actually look for in the query, the most common mistakes writers make, and how small changes can make the difference between being ignored and getting that request. This isn't theory, this is real behind the scenes look at how agents read queries and decide who moves forward. So grab your current query letter because by the end of this episode, you'll see it very differently. Amy, welcome back. We are so excited to have you. Amy is a repeat offender here on Debut Writers.
Thank you so much for having me back again. I've really been looking forward to this because I think demystifying the query letter is something that a lot of authors really need help with to get across that finish line.
Yes. And I remember being a very green author once upon a time and having to figure out how to write a query letter. I cannot tell you how many webinars I participated in, how many forums, how many times I really, really messed it up and got those form rejections like nonstop, like a lot of them. And then when I got into the industry and I started really learning how to break down the query and what people are really looking for, because I sat on that other side in acquisitions, that's when I really started to understand what was important in the query and what needed to be brought to the forefront and what was kind of not necessary or extra or what was really kind of like closing the door immediately. I know agents, I heard an agent talk one time about like a red light game where she pulls up to a red light and she'll open her phone and see how many queries she can make it through before the light turns green. That is how quickly she would go through them and, like, just be like, "Nope, nope, nope, maybe, nope." Then there's like, "Oh my gosh, it's that quick." She's like, "Yes, I can tell that quickly if I'm gonna even spend a second reading that query or not."
I mean, I get the theory and practice. I don't know that I'd read queries at a traffic light.
Yeah,
I think she was using that metaphorically, at least I hope.
let's hope so.
But yeah, I really hope to be able to break this down. Like you said, I have a template basically for a query that's 4 parts that we're going to talk about today. And we're going to really dive deep into all 4 parts. But first, I wanted to kind of let authors know. And again, I've told you this before, and I thank you for having a platform like this because one of the greatest joys that I have as an agent is being able to reach people that I can't in person reach through educational platforms such as this, because I can't respond to every query. But this is a way that we can get that information out there because I want to see every author have their publishing dreams come true and their books make a difference in the lives of others. And unfortunately, that does start with the query letter. That's the first thing that an agent or even a small publisher is going to read if you're repping yourself. So I think first and foremost, defining the query. Basically, it's a resume for your book, and it has one function that is absolutely it, and that is to get the agent to read your submission. Just like you said, you don't want to get that quick pass, but what can we do with this one document that's so important to get an agent to read what you have sent them? And one thing to keep in mind is that, like you said, that the agent that you spoke with, agents do read queries in batches, a lot of times lying in bed on our phones. And so it's important to make yours simplistic and short and concise and to have all of the information in there that helps us make a decision moving forward. So I'm going to quickly tell you what the 4 parts are, and then we'll go into each one. And first part is one that's often overlooked, and that's agent personalization. So we're going to talk about that. The second part is the metadata paragraph. So if you're not sure what that means, I'm going to explain that to you. The third is the pitch or plot paragraph. And then lastly would be the author bio. And that's it. Those are the 4 parts of a query.
Yes, no more, no less.
Correct. Correct. And so the first part, personalization. I think this is probably the most important part of your query. And there is a science behind it. So think about if you are attending a dinner with your spouse for a work event, and you don't know anybody. And you're sitting next to someone and you strike up a conversation and you find out that you're from the same hometown, or you find out that you like the same books. You're probably going to talk to that person because you have a human connection. And that is what personalization is all about. It is showing that you have a connection to this agent. And that can be something as simple as you went to a conference, you heard them speak, you heard them say they're looking for what you write. And so you let them know that I met you at a conference. I heard you say you were looking for this, and here it is. It could be that you read their manuscript wish list and found that you're writing something that they rep. It could be a
Get
referral. So I got a query a year ago, and the author said, this particular editor has read this work and recommended you would be a good fit. And immediately when I read that, I automatically knew I have to read this because this editor thinks I'm a good fit. So there was that referral piece. So
yes, that personal
personalization, I
connection.
think, is so important. And if I open up a query and I don't see that, it's not that it's an automatic pass. Please don't think that. But I think, do they even know who they're sending this to? It feels like a mass email, spam going out. And you don't want it to feel like that. You want it to feel like you personally selected this agent for a particular reason.
Yes, yes, I totally agree.
Mhm.
And I can remember spending hours once I learned that, I can remember spending hours deep diving on agents and, like, looking for even that one tiny, tiny little connection to pull
Yes,
on so they know, like, "Hey, I've been following you on Twitter. I saw that you made that comment, and it made me feel like you'd be the perfect agent for me." And
absolutely.
yeah, so it's really important. Probably, I would say that's probably when agents are saying yes, no very quickly is in that very first paragraph of, does this feel like a blast, a query blast, or do
Yes,
I
yes,
feel like this was personally written to me?
yes. And I have a sample of that, but we kind of talked about it. But it really does make a huge difference. So I'm going to give examples throughout the whole talking about each part of a query that I made up of a book that's not been written. That if someone writes it, please sub it to me. So my personalization example is when I saw on dear agent Amy Nielsen, when I saw on your manuscript wish list that you were looking for manuscripts featuring authentic neurodiverse representation, I knew I had to reach out. I get that a lot in queries. I have an autistic son, and I'm always looking for that representation. And when I see that in the beginning, I know this person sees me not just for what I'm looking for to rep, but also as a mom and as a person of a caregiver of someone with special needs. And that just makes me feel seen, makes me eager to read what have they written. So I think that's really important. And additionally, Anne, so I spent 3 days this week finding 10 editors for one 500-word picture book because I have to do the same
Wow.
work. As an agent, I want to make sure when I send something out, it feels perfect for that editor's list. So we're not expecting the author to do anything that we on our end don't also do. So it is tedious work, but once you start doing it and you start to feel so much better that you're sending the right submission to the right person. And that is going to be a much quicker way to get your words read by that agent. And you want to keep that short. I'm talking like less than 50 words. What I had written, my sample was 20. So we're going to talk a lot about brevity. You want your query letter to be around 300, 350, no more than 400. And that's if like you're world building or you have dual POV, which we'll talk about. And
I
it's
remember
really,
the first time you tell an author that, they're like, "Wait, how many words do I get?" You're like, "Not that many."
if you can't nail your own story down to its most simplistic summary, then you need to figure out how to do that and what it is. And we're going to talk about that. Okay, the next paragraph is called the metadata paragraph. And this is where all of the pieces of the story are all in one place. And so those pieces are that you're going to have in your metadata paragraph and the title in all caps. Now you're going to have titles of other books too that are going to be comp titles, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But
Very important.
just your book in all caps, because you want the agent to really notice that title. You're going to have the word count rounded to the nearest thousands. So if your word count was 74,369 words, 74,000. Your goal is to make it easy to read, just visually how it looks to make it easy to read. The age range. So picture book, middle grade, young adult, you want that age range in there because it's not always obvious. And then your genre, and this is important, age range is not a genre. So young adult is not a genre. Despite sometimes you see that on like Query Tracker, what's the genre? That is an age range. So you still need to put the genre of your story, the comps, and you want 2 to 3. You can use a movie or a TV show. And an example that I'm going to read to you, there is a TV series used. This is the part that gets really hard. They need to be like 3 to 5 years old, not too big. You don't want to comp Harry Potter because that's setting the age.
That's what I was just about to ask, like, how old can these comps be? Because I've heard that too, like, nothing over 5 years old. And
Yes,
then also, how big or small can these comps be? Because you don't wanna be so small, you're obscure, and they're like, "What do you I don't even know that book you're talking about." Versus,
correct.
yeah, you don't wanna comp yourself to Harry Potter or Twilight.
Correct. You want to pick stuff that's mid-size, like maybe 10,000 reviews on Amazon is what I've heard an editor say. And I've even heard editors say 2 to 3 years for comps. That's really hard. Sometimes it's easier for agents to find those comps when we're subbing to editors because we have access to stuff that hasn't come out yet through Publishers Marketplace. So we can find sometimes comps that, are still in the queue to be published, but doing the due diligence, and I'm going to give you some resources at the very end for finding comps, writing query, and all that. So you want to watch the whole episode so you get to those resources. And that metadata paragraph, again, around 50 words. Super, super, super short. This is where, and I know sometimes we don't like getting those form rejections, but this is where sometimes you will get them. Because if, let's say, your word count is way over what is standard for that genre or age range, then you might get a quick, rejection. Sending a manuscript to an agent and they don't rep that genre, which means you probably didn't do the homework, then
But
you
you'd
will
be
get a quick.
surprised how many times I talk to literary agents and that is their number one problem is they are
Mhm.
getting all these queries that are not even in their genre, and then these authors over here are frustrated because 'cause they're like, "I just keep getting these form rejections," and I'm like, "Well, who did you query? Like, let's look into these agents and make sure they were going to be a good fit," and I was like, "Literally none of them rep this genre." Like, what were
Right.
you thinking?
Well, and I think too, and I understand because I've been there as a querying author, you just hope maybe they don't, but they'll love this one. And
Yeah. It's
that
not in your wheelhouse, but trust me, you're gonna really, really love it. But, tell me this now, when agents are saying that they only want certain genres, it's not because that's what they like to read. It's not because
not
that's
at all.
their favorite type of book to read. More so, it is, "That's what I can sell. That's the connections I have on the other side of this." So, if
Absolutely.
I'm a fantasy rep, I'm not gonna be able to sell your, your romance because that's just not what I do.
Mhm.
So it's not like "Oh, you're gonna love my book even though it's not your genre." It's not about that. It's about, I can love it all day long, I just can't sell it.
Correct. You would not want me to be your agent for a high concept sci-fi or epic fantasy. I read that. I'm an editorial agent, so I do a lot of editorial work with my clients. And when I first started agenting, I thrillers is my favorite genre to read in and adult thrillers. But I quickly realized I was in the book industry as a youth librarian for 20 years. So I know the kidlit market. I have connections in the kidlit market. And after unsuccessfully, working with adult manuscripts, I realize I need to stay where I can be the most successful and in turn be the most successful for my clients. And once I made that shift, then I've been selling picture books left and right and it's been going great. So you do want to pursue an agent that is going to be an expert in the field that you're writing in. And maybe not an expert, but they have, like you said, they have the connections. An agent's a bridge to an editor. And so I have more of those connections. So, but I still read adult thrillers all the time. And I love them. But, I realized that picture books and middle grade was just where I was the most successful and in turn the most successful for my clients. So here's the example for the metadata that goes with the personalization. And then I'll read the whole thing at the end. Stress Chess is an 80,000 word young adult contemporary romance that will appeal to fans of the neurodivergent character in the Netflix series Atypical and the romance and competitiveness of Jenny Hill's The Golden Hour. Golden Hour, 2024, Harpeth Road Publishing. So that is 35 words. And so I did use a TV show, but it's current. And actually, The Golden Hour by Jenny Hale, it does feature a neurodivergent main character, and I was her sensitivity reader for that manuscript, which was a lot of fun to do. And I did put the publication year and the publisher. I like to see that in a query because if immediately I can see what year the book and how old it is. And if it was a mid-sized publisher, if it was a big five publisher, I think the more information is the better in that case. When I send subletters out to editors, I always put for my comp titles the publisher and what year, always. And I just think
That's
that's
really
just
good to know. I never considered putting that.
because what if the agent doesn't know that manuscript and they got to go look it up, or if they don't know how the easier you can make it on the agent, the more chances that you're going to get them to read your pages. You want to make the query letter as easy on them as possible. I have a daughter in college right now. And one of the things that we've been doing is I've been helping her because she's been out of high school for a while. So she's going back as an older student, older in her late 20s. But it's been a while since she's been in school.
Oh,
And
whoa.
I've been helping her go through her assignment and make sure she meets submission guidelines. And the instructors, if they don't, they're docking points. Like you didn't, I wanted this uploaded as a PDF, not a Word doc. So you just want to make sure, especially when you're subbing to an agent, that you're making sure that you cross all of those T's, dot those I's. And again, that's another way to improve those chances that your work gets read. And it's professional courtesy too.
Well, and the same thing too, like with authors, when we're telling them how to submit their manuscript, it's like
Mhm.
Times Roman, double space, 12 font, Word doc, do not send me a PDF. Like there's reasons for all of this.
Yeah, yes. And part of the reason is, the agent may be opening up your query on their phone. It may be on their Kindle. It may be because a lot of times I'll send mine to my Kindle. It may be on an iPad. It may be on a laptop, a PC, Google Docs, Word Docs. So you just want it to be as clean as possible on your end. Because if I get a query and there's no breaks between paragraphs and everything's just all I am visually impaired. I would have to download that and go through it myself, change the font, to be able to read it. And agents don't have that kind of time. So you just really want to make sure on your end, you make sure, send it to yourself in different formats. Open it up on your phone, open it up on your computer and your iPad, send it to somebody and say, hey, can you see this clearly on whatever device you're looking for? I think is something else that's really important. So we've
Well,
gone
and
over.
going back to
Oh,
that
go ahead.
visually pleasing thing too, in the previous episode where we talked about those first 10 pages, that was another thing we brought up too is if
Yes.
I open it up and it's just these huge chunk paragraphs all the way down, I'm not even going to take the time to read that because I can already tell it's not going to land the right way for me and so it's a no. So it's these such quick, turnarounds that agents have, so you've got to be aware of those,
Mhm.
ensure that you're not making those common mistakes that are just getting that no without them even really giving it a chance because you couldn't even meet the bare basic like submission.
Yeah, and sometimes I have a few responses on Query Manager that I can say, like, this word count is too high for this age range and genre, just so I can give some feedback. But I've said this before, this is the part of the job where we're not getting paid anything. So reading queries is so time consuming and I love it. But the quicker I can get you a response, whether that's a pass or send me more, the quicker you can either check my name off of your list and add someone else, or, send me that information if it's 50 pages or they're full. And so you want to give the agent the ability to give you that quick response. And sometimes I'll say, the formatting came in wonky. Please revise this and resubmit it to me just because of the formatting. But it's those little things that sometimes you don't think of. With that?
So that's nice of you. Here, have a second chance, real quick.
Yeah, yeah. I've done that. So we talked about personalization, the metadata. Okay, now we're at the pitch and plot.
Excellent.
Yeah. So you get a few more words here, not too many.
Yep. Like 150, right?
I was going to say 150 to 200. Now, that can change based on your story too. But this is basically that pitch part. Paragraph 3 is where you're talking about your book. And you typically want that to be, and this is not always the case, and this is going to look different for picture books too. This is more for full-length novels. For a lot of picture books, this will work. But there is kind of a formula for this too. And I have that example. So here, you want to tell who your main character is, what they want, what is standing in the way of them getting it, and what's at stake if they don't get it. That's basically all we need to know. If you have like a romance is a lot of time dual POVs, then you can do that for each because each in a romance, each one has their own goals personally in addition to their romance. But then you get a little less words for each one. And obviously, if you're doing an epic fantasy, there's a little bit of world building that you need to put in there. Again, not too much. And you want to be about the first third to half of the book. One of the things I see a lot in this part of the query is vagueness. All's at stake. Everything's on the line. Willing to risk all. That could be any book. So you want to be
I know, right?
what specific. Now, those types of themes are great for like jacket copy because readers connect with that. Like, oh, I love an all, those types of themes. But specificity in that part of the query letter is really, really important as opposed to themes. I think another uh avoid themes, be specific. And I think that's kind of about it for that part of the query. Now, if you're writing, like, say, like a concept picture book that's about counting, obviously you don't have a main character. So your query for that's going to look a little different in how you write that, but still just succinct is just so, so, so important.
Yeah, and it's not I think a big misconception here is it's not a summary of your book.
Nope, not at
And
all.
it's not the point where you give it all away either. Like, you wanna leave that cliffhanger on those stakes, correct? And, like, you want the agent to be like, "Well, I've gotta read this now. Now I have to, like, know what's going on."
Yeah. And now you do give the spoilers for that first third to half. So that's like not using that vague language like rule the world, all hope is lost, risk everything. You do want to say specifically what does risk everything mean? What does all hope is lost mean? And one way to do the stakes part of it, and I tell clients this a lot, is if they choose A, they risk B. If they choose C, they risk D, where both outcomes are equally awful. And again, wanting to pique that interest. Now, the synopsis, I'll briefly stop here and do a little bit of an explanation about that. So, again, the pitch, first third to half, telling everything, leaving, not being vague, but not giving away the ending. So in the synopsis, you list everything that happens. You tell everything that happens. Unlike your story, your synopsis is like you're telling someone what this story is about. Jack does this, Jack does
Like
that,
old
Susie
school
does
Cliff
this. Correct. The Cliff Notes, one page, including all spoilers. And so I have some information for that too. I'll share at the end. That you get about 500 words, one page. And it's really important to be able to succinctly, start with your A plot. And sometimes you can squeeze in some of the B plot, but typically you want to focus on that A plot for your synopsis.
So, and with the synopsis, what is the agent taking away from that? Like, what is the big importance of the synopsis? Like, for a writer to understand this is why they need the synopsis. So, make sure you're delivering that.
Yeah. So we still have one more part of the query to get to, but I will stop here because the synopsis is related to that pitch because they are two different things. So you have that pitch written. The synopsis is a separate document that you're going to upload and where you tell everything that happens in the story. So let's say I read a query and I am super excited about it. And then I read the first 10 pages and I feel like this is something that I really like. Sometimes I may just request the full, but I may want to see, does what I think should happen, does the story deliver what the premise is telling me it's going to? And so I'm not reading this for pleasure. I'm reading this as a product that I'm going to try to sell. So I don't need to be surprised. And some agents don't feel that way. They want to be surprised when they read the manuscript. This is not pleasure reading for me. So before I request any more of the document, 50 pages or the full, I will read that synopsis and see if the story beats lay out the way I'm promised that in the query that they're going to. And so that synopsis can either be the make or break for me requesting more of that manuscript.
And that's so important too. And when you talk
Mhm,
about the beats, we did a whole series on how to write your book, and we really broke down the act one, act two, act three, the beats. When do you need to be getting to the catalyst? When do you need to be getting to the midpoint? And all of that stuff too, because that stuff does make a difference at the end, like you
mhm.
said. Just think about reading. I'm a huge thriller reader.
Me
I
too.
love to write it. I love to read it. It's my jam.
Mhm.
I recently, and I won't call the author out, but I recently read a book and I'm so excited. Like, it is like, I cannot wait for the end because I can't figure it out. And I love those thrillers because I love
Yes.
like trying to figure it out. And when I can't figure it out, I'm just so enthralled. I'm like, yes, this is great. And then I get to the end and it was like, oh, so and so was possessed. And I was like, what?
right?
Like it was such a drop in the bucket. And I was so mad that I read the whole book. I swore that author off. I was like, I'm never reading anything else that they do.
Well, and
And
that's
so
something
that's
that you
kind of
would
like what
find in a
format.
synopsis. Yeah,
Yeah.
and so for me, I'm not great at books where characters left and right are having premonitions and visions. It's just not something that I like to read or rep, and a lot that's a tool that a lot of authors use well, but for me, I think it's a little overdone. And also, and not saying if some people can take that technique and use it well, and it makes perfect sense. But I'm talking like if it just happens and there's no reason for it happening. So if I see
It's like
that a lot of
you've lost the plot or you, like, can't figure out how to wrap it up, and so then you're just like how Lost, that series that everybody if you're as old as me, that Lost, how everyone was like, "Oh, they were already dead, it was a dream," and you're like, "What?"
right?
Doubt I spoiled that for anyone, but
No, 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 no.
one of those moments where it's like, yeah, the reader needs to feel satisfied at the end. So, like and this is where that starts, and if you can't get there with the book, then again, I can't sell that. I can't no one's gonna buy that.
Yeah. And also too, like if main characters that you loved end up not making it to the end, or things, but you really just want to lay all of that out in the synopsis. So, and every agent's preferences are going to be bigger and or different, not bigger, but and then what the agent thinks they can sell to, like you said, those connections.
I had an agent one time tell me because I told her the whole premise of the story, and she was like, and it was at a pitch event, and she was like, I like this. This is great. And then I gave her a little bit more background on the main character, and the main character was a writer, and she was like, I'm out. She was like, I can't do, I do too much writing and too much of this publishing world in my day job. Like, I cannot take a book that has anything like to do with like the main character being a writing or in the publishing world. And so she was like, but aside from that, it sounded great.
And
But I
that is
never would have
exceptional.
gotten that kind of information from, like, just a cold query. So, again, pitch events are another, like, side note, a great thing that we'll talk about later. But so, yeah, so sometimes it can be something as small as that too.
Yeah. Yeah. And those types of, plot devices can be some agents love them, some agents not, and you want an agent that is passionate about your work and loves everything about it. Not that one thing is like a pet peeve to them, because the more passionate we are about your work, the harder we're going to work to get it sold. So I don't sign anything unless I am absolutely in love with it and I also have a great relationship with the author and feel like that we're going to be a good fit. Okay. So I'm gonna read you the pitch that I wrote for um, No Stress Chess. 16-year-old Michael wants nothing more than to win his state's teen chess competition, but so does his rival and special education classmate Rose. The prize is an all-expense paid trip to compete at the national competition in Florida and a trip to Disney. As the two practice, Michael starts to fall for the Disney-obsessed Rose. If he goes to the competition and he wins, he risks breaking the heart of his first love, which would also break his own. But if he doesn't go, his chance of securing the national title and a full ride scholarship to UCF is off the table. That's 100 words.
And nobody wants either one of those scenarios. So it's like you
No,
did a great job, like, setting up the either or, and neither one of them are something that you want.
no, you don't want him to break his, first love's heart or miss the scholarship. So, and I didn't tell you that has a single mother. All it's just I focused on the two main characters, and this not told from her point of view. Again, this story isn't written. I just made it up of something I would like to have in my inbox. But really focusing on those main characters and the stakes and the goals. What do they want, and what's standing in the way? And again, at 100 words, so super succinct. And I really do want this book. People, listen, write it. Okay, lastly, and then we'll talk about some other things about queries, is the author bio. And I know for debut authors, sometimes they're like, I have nothing to write there. Yes, you do. You do have something to write there. And I'm going to tell you some things that you can put there. So if you have any publishing credits, and that doesn't just mean published books. What if you have a short story in an anthology? Or you wrote a nonfiction article for a journal, any type of publishing credits that you have. Now, if you have like 30, pick your couple of favorite. You don't want to put them all there. If you have self-published works, opinions on this are kind of varying. One of my clients has a self-published work that has done very well for self-published, and it's a great book, and I've read it and I loved it. So we have that in her query letter for the one that we're sending out. If you have self-published stuff that say you published 10, 20 years ago that have like 3 likes on Amazon, maybe not the best thing to put that on there because I do go look those things up. If I've read the query letter and the synopsis, I start digging into a little bit more about this person. I may check out their social media and see what kind of things they post because that tells a little bit about who you are as an individual. And I want someone that's positive about the publishing world to work with. Everybody has a bad day, but if every day querying sucks and I'm tired of getting these rejections and blah, 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 I told you this the last time I think we talked that I followed this author on Twitter who every time she would get a pass, she would paint a flower on a piece of fence. Maybe I didn't.
No,
And
I've never heard
eventually so she paints a fence, and eventually she did get an agent and her book published, and she brought that piece of fence that she had, the little piece of picket fence, to her book launch. And it was the cutest thing to see that every pass is one step closer to a yes. And
Mhm.
so
Gives me chills.
I know it was this I forget her name, but I tell that story all the time.
But that's a really good thing to consider too, like as a querying author, and you're out there and you're trying to find an agent, and it's just good prep work too, because when you put your book out there and you're asking readers to read it and you're asking readers to join you and follow you and be a part of this journey as you put more and more books out, what you're putting out there and how you're putting it out there really does matter. And so
Mhm.
this is kind of that first step of, are you being positive, or are you,
Yes.
if I go and look at your social media and you're ranting about agents and, like, calling them out and, like, saying
No,
it's like, I don't wanna touch that with a 10-foot pole.
yeah. Say that to your writing partners in private. Because it does, to be negative about an industry that you wanna be a part of is never really a good idea, but it is 100% okay to have those bad days, and we all do, and sometimes 3 rejections on a Friday, and you aren't I try to never do a pass on a Friday. I just think or a holiday. It's just that's mean.
It is, it's like it ruins the whole weekend. You're like,
And I've
"No."
accidentally done it before, and I'm like, "Oh, shoot, I should not do that?" So, anyway, be kind. If you're an author or an agent, we all wanna be kind. So and you also your day job, especially if it relates or doesn't relate to what you're writing, especially if it does. Like, I have one of my clients is a trauma therapist that works with kids, and she writes books about kids with disabilities and neurodivergence, and so she works with those kids, and so she has a direct connection with what she writes. It doesn't have to be true, but if it is, put that in there. One thing that I think is really important doesn't you don't have to have this, but if you are part of any professional writing organizations, SCBWI, romance organizations, thriller groups, I know you're part of Thriller 101, any organizations that you're part of creatively, put that down there. Not I think there's only one of my kidlit clients that is not part of SCBWI. And not that it is a requirement at all, but it just shows your dedication to the profession. It shows that your desire to want to improve. And I'm always looking to improve. No one has ever completely learned it all. So
Yeah.
it's or you went to a writing conference or anything, that you've done you went to a webinar, those sorts of things. And then lastly, this is the part where you can be clever and voicey too in your bio. I know one of my critique partners, like her last line of her query was something like, um, I have a growing collection of craft books and coffee mugs, but I don't know which is larger, or something and when I read you this sample, you'll see what I typically put at the end of my queries and things. But do you have anything else to add about author bio? Something that you think that authors could add?
So, I get this a lot with authors. Should I put that I love tennis, or should I put that I'm a mom with 2 kids in middle school, or, like, should I put down kind of just a little personal note about who I am and maybe what I like? Or is it like, if it doesn't really relate to, because, like, if I'm doing a children's book and I've taught elementary school, that's important. Or if I'm writing children's books for neurodivergent children and I have a neurodivergent child, that's important. But
Yes.
what if it doesn't tie in? Do I put that information in, or do I just leave it out?
I think you can. One of my clients and her bio that we have been sending out, and actually we just signed a contract last week. Like the last line is something about her. She lives in California with her, fluffy Saint Bernard, her husband and son, and they play board games. And she loves hockey. She does write a bunch of books about hockey. It's not written like that. It's written much better. But I think this is where you humanize yourself, you know? You're reminding me that there is a person with a life and a family on the other side of this document. And not that I don't know that when I open it up, but this is a place to just really kind of give that little general. You open up with reminding me that you're human because we have a connection either through the manuscript wish list or through where we live or whatever it may be. And then you're closing it with something that's human. And I just think that's really important. So here's my
I
sample.
like that idea of, like, opening and closing with those, like, human connection
Yeah,
pieces.
that's what writing is. And when you as a reader are reading a book, even if you never have met the author, you are peeking into the most private part of their life, and they've given that to you. And so I think just making those human connections, even if you never speak, you know, in your query letter, you can do that. So here is the bio that I wrote for this fictional book that someone's going to write and send it to me. A former youth librarian, I penned this novel behind my circulation desk. As the mother of an autistic son who loves and is very good at chess, I hope you find Michael and Rosa's story compelling. When I'm not reading or writing, you can find me boating the waters of Tampa Bay with a canine co-captain and a mermaid life vest. And that's 60 words. So 50-ish words, and then just because I talked about my canine co-captain and a mermaid life vest, clearly I have to show you a picture. I looked it up before I got it out here.
Like, it's such a quick statement. Oh, that's adorable. It's
But
such a quick statement, though, to give personality to you.
yep, and you don't have to, that's completely optional, but I really like that. I really like when a query ends like that, and I feel like I know something personal about this person, and only share what you're comfortable with sharing, obviously. But so those are my
Another question.
yeah.
So, if it has nothing to do with my book, nothing to do with, like, anything, like, professionally that I'm doing writing, but I happen to stalk you enough to know that you're an avid tennis player and I'm an avid tennis player, do I, like, drop that in there to, like, kinda create
100%. Of course you do. Making those personal connections, it's so important. I think this business is more about relationships than it is about anything else.
Yes, yes. I definitely agree on that. I was just talking about that with another author that, I'm setting up a panel for a upcoming event I'm doing, and we were talking about that, like, he was like, "Well, I can connect you with with this person and then that person." I'm like, "That's what this business, once you start getting more into it, it's all about those connections you're making."
And I just subbed an editor, and we actually used one of the editor's clients' books as a comp. And my client knows is critique partners with that author. And we didn't really do it on purpose, wink, wink, but it was a great comp. Yeah, and I said to the editor, but I'm submitting this to you. We actually used one of your acquisition books as a comp, and as an aside, my client is good friends with your client, just to kind of, again, any connections that you have can
Yeah.
really help.
So going back to the comp thing real quick,
Mhm.
if I can comp a book, my book to a book you've repped, is that preferred in book comps or is it kind of like, you're trying too hard?
It's not really preferred or not preferred. If it's a good comp, it's a good comp,
Okay.
and I gonna talk about resources in a minute, but I've heard an agent say before that it does kind of pique her interest when a book that she gets sent to is a good comp to one of hers, as long as it's not too similar. So it's comping something, and we didn't really talk about that about comps, so I'll drop that in here. Comps aren't necessarily meant to be exactly like your book. You can comp a character, you can comp a setting, you can comp a time period, you can comp a conflict. There's lots of different. In this example that I did, in Jeannie Hill's book, The Golden Hour, it's not about chess, it's a math competition, but it's still a neurodivergent character in a sort of a competition. And so you're kind of and
And
this is how important comps are. I was querying my young adult for about a year, and I was revising the query. I'd get a pass and I'd go back and learn and whatever. And I changed a comp because the one I was using was too old, I realized after a year of not realizing it. And I changed it to something that was much more current, that I felt was a better fit. And within 1 month of changing that comp, I did nothing else. I got an offer of representation from an agent. I got an R&R from a mid-sized publisher, and then I got an offer of publication from an indie press. So, and within 30 days, all three of those by just changing a comp.
That is huge, and that's what I think people don't realize about the comps too. First of all, I think some people don't even put them in there, and, then you're really missing the boat by not putting the comps in there, and then also by making sure it's, like, a good comp. So my rule of thumb is never comp a book you haven't read. So, like, definitely make sure if you're comping the book that you read it and you're tying it into your way of being able to say, like how you said, like, comped mine to Gone Girl because it's got the same kind of psychological twist at the end. But the rest of the book isn't. I mean, it's about a mother and daughter relationship, so it's really different. So, when you're writing that comp, do you just put the comp and then move on and let the agent figure out how specifically it's comped? Or do you say, with the same twisty ending as Gone Girl matched with the, bravado of some other book type of thing?
I think you should put why, because how's the agent going to know? Like here, I said, where is it? I have so many notes. I said it matches the romance and competitiveness of Jenny Hill's The Golden Hour. So if you know that manuscript, then even if you don't, there's a romance and there's a competition in that book and then
Mhm.
in this one as well. So I do think it is important. Are you comping the setting? In my manuscript, I don't remember the name of the TV show, but took place in a trailer park. And so my novel takes place in a trailer park. So I comped this TV show for the setting specifically, and then I comped Maid for the single mom protagonist struggling. And so
And I
if you
think that's
kind
the
of
thing they call it. Yeah, and they call it the sticky mashup. I've heard it been called that. Like, you're not gonna have you don't you're not finding a book that matches your book exactly because if that book if that book's already out there, people are gonna buy that one, so how am I gonna
right,
sell yours?
exactly.
It's like, I'm taking
Exactly.
the best parts of book A, B, and C and making
Mhm.
my own book and point that out and say, this is but if you think about it too, like, when you're deciding anything, you say, like, when you're trying to pick a show, it's like, I want something like this, but with this, so it's like it's the same kind of theory.
Well, and I'm gonna drop some resources now and how finding comps. There's lots of different ways. I think my favorite way is I talk about this podcast all the time. I'm sure you know what I'm gonna say. The shit no one tells you about writing. I hope I can say that word on the show.
Yeah, totally.
So they have a segment once a month on a Monday where an independent bookseller, their name's Emily Summers from a bookstore in DC, and you can go leave an audio message on the Shit No One Tells You About Writing's website and kind of give a little one line pitch about what your book is about. And then Emily comes on and goes through all of them and gives people comp titles. So it's phenomenal and it's a free
Amazing.
service. Yes. Another thing that I really like about their podcast, I've been listening to it from the beginning and I listen to it every week because I continue to learn. So I've listened to thousands of queries on there. So the two literary agents read queries that authors submit. I submitted mine early in the process. You can submit yours to them. You can redact your name. You can redact the title of your book if you want, and they will read it live on the show and critique it. And I think that's a valuable service that's at no charge to you. So both of those are part of what they do to service the writing community.
That's really amazing. There's also that other one, where was it? Was it Shark not Shark Tank, but it was like the Shark List, or it was something to where, like, you Yes, Query Shark. I knew Shark was in there.
That, was by Janet Reed. She has unfortunately passed away a couple of years ago. I did look that website up before we got on today, and it is still active, so you can still go on and read the backlog of all the queries that she's reviewed and get or learn from, what other people have posted and the feedback that she gave. So those are some good places to find comp titles. Also Amazon. If you have one book that is similar to your book, put it in Amazon because typically you might also like.
Yep.
It's a great place to look for those comps as well. So any other questions that you have? Anything else you think we haven't covered? I do have like,
Well,
oh,
I can also plug Parlexi, the AI company that I have.
yes,
We have specific chat GPTs that help you find book comps. We have Agent Finder that will help you kind of find certain agents and tell you like what the connection is. Because
yes,
again, hours of, stalking and deep diving on the internet in the past, letting AI kind of like do that digging for you. Now, it's not perfect, but at least it kind of gives you kind of a jump start on where
yeah,
maybe you should be looking to, here's a list of 10 agents, maybe only 5 of them really were a good connection, but at least it's given you a start.
correct. Absolutely. So you said in your questions things that make me stop reading. So I have a list of things that I think, I don't like to end on a negative note, so we'll end on a positive note, but I'll quickly say these. And it's not to be malicious because if I could rep every author out there, I would do it. Trust me. But then you would not like me because I would not have time to work on your stuff. But a few things to kind of think about. And I think most of these we've touched on, but a submission that doesn't fit my wish list. And I think most agents are going to be the same. That very rarely am I going to sign something that I'm not comfortable repping. Word count too high for the genre. Too many genres. So if you say this is a high concept action thriller with sci-fi elements and some romance, wait a minute, wait a minute, wait a minute. You need to know what your book is. Genre mashups are common. I mean, romantasy is one of the hottest genres right now, and you can have elements of other genres, but just kind of know what your genre is. And if you don't know, this is a good time to rely on your critique partners because sometimes you're so close to your manuscript that you don't know, I'm not really sure. So they can be helpful.
And your manuscript has to fit in a genre. I remember with The Lost Woman, I was like, "It doesn't fit in any genre. It's its own, like, new space." And then I realized I was like, "No, that's what's wrong with it, is the fact that, like, I didn't write something, like, that fit into a specific genre." But
Yes.
it has to. So, like, knowing your genre is really important.
Because if there's no place for your book right now in a bookstore, then there's no place for your book right now in a bookstore. And so it is amazing to write something super creative, but it still has to fit somewhere. If I get a query that says there's nothing like this in existence, this is so unique, nothing like this has ever been written, I have no idea. Are there readers out there for it? If nothing like this has ever been written, is there a reader for it? You want to write to a genre that already has a dedicated fan base, romance, thrillers, etc. And all of these things, there are exceptions to every single rule. There will probably be a new genre come out that we did not see coming, like the romantasy. And, until that happens, and maybe you are the one to write it and there's some agent willing to take a chance. But we want to set you up for the best opportunity for success. And this template that I've gone through you with, the personalization, metadata, pitch, and the bio, this is one way to do it. This will never be wrong, but there are some people do put that metadata at the end. I think at the top sets me up as the reader to know what I'm going to be reading. If I don't know the genre, the age range, and I just go right into the pitch, I have no idea. So it
It's
will never
basically
be.
like reading a book without reading the jacket. Like, I have a hard time
Mhm.
just launching into a book without having any understanding of, like, what's going on or
Yes.
the genre or, like, the main characters, the stakes. Just try to read a book without knowing anything about it. That's kind of like what you're
You're
describing.
disoriented, or like watching a movie when you haven't read the pitch or watched the trailer. Um,
Yes.
so that's super, super important. If it's too long, if I see a query that's 1,000 words, I have a feeling that probably the manuscript is going to be overwritten as well. And I just don't have time to digest 1,000 words and understand what this is. That's why that short pitch is so important. And we talked about submission guidelines. If I get queries sent to me via DM, my personal email, I just respond, I'm not open to submissions in my personal email. It is okay to email me and ask, are you open? When are you going to be open? How do I query you? Sending stuff to personal email. I got an email the other day from an author that was, I'm not joking, about 2,000 words. And it was his life story and bio, not even about his book. And he's like, if you think you like what I'm about, everything about me, then I'd love to send you my manuscript. I'm like, I don't even know what you write. But and I understand how desperate you want to get that, yes. But following submission guidelines is a much quicker way to get across that finish line. It's just respecting boundaries, just the same way you would as a college student, submitting your work the way your college professor is asking. And I'm not your professor or instructor, but we are collaborators. And I trust me, when I send my submissions to editors, I follow their guidelines. If they want a PDF, they get a PDF. If they want it via email as an attachment, they get it as an attachment. If they send me a submission form via Google, they get it that way. So, that's just really important professional.
Yeah, and it all goes back to, like, publishing as a business, and, like,
Mhm.
this is basically like you're applying for a job, so you wouldn't just, like, you wouldn't show up at the owner's house and knock on their door and be like, "Hi, I'd like to have a job with your company. Are you
Right.
interested?" Like, that's kind of like, you wouldn't do that, and so just always staying professional because, again, that also shows if you follow the query formula, you follow the submissions, you're professional about it, you clearly are you're in the right genre, you're in the right word range. All that stuff just shows professionalism and shows that you
100%.
at least have learned enough about this business to know better. And that I think makes a huge difference as well. Tell me something super positive for authors to really take home and understand about their queries.
Well, I think that the biggest thing for you to understand is what it's like on the other side of that. And to know that most agents, I can't speak for all, but I know every agent that I know reads your query with respect, with honor, and with dignity. And we are honored that you trust us to send your work to. It means the world to me when I open up a query and someone has personalized that to me. And I feel so appreciative and thankful. And once we do reach out and we find that there's a way that we can help each other, that we want to be your collaborator for the bulk of your career and walk with you in that journey. And just you want to find not just an agent, you want to find your agent.
I was just about to add that to the end too. Basically, like there is a wrong agent and there is a right agent. Definitely want an agent to really campaign for you and really be passionate. I have queried people that I know personally and they have passed and it hasn't they've been like, "Look, I love you, Anne, but like I can't be your champion for this. Like this is
Mhm.
just not something that I'm going to be able to do you right by." And I think that's really important. And so much like, first, I need to fall in love with your book and I need to know I can sell your book and I can work with your book. Now I need to know that I can work with you and I can love you and we can have a relationship. So there are those two sides. And so all of that stuff really comes into play. And I'm really excited. Amy, will you make sure to send me? Can we put the template in our newsletter?
Absolutely. Yes. And if you go to my website and you go to polishing your submission packet before querying, I actually have a it's all written out, but then there's a free webinar at the bottom, and I use this same example, but I deep dive into how to write the synopsis, what to expect in those opening pages, what I'm looking for. So that's available on my website too, but I can send you the template that you can put in your newsletter to directly reach your readers so they don't have to go digging for one more thing because it's already hard enough to find all these resources.
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much. That's such a
Of
great resource.
course.
We will link all of that in our newsletter. So make sure that you subscribe to the Davy Writers newsletter on Substacks. Make sure to check out Amy on her website and reach out to her professionally.
Feel free to DM me Twitter any questions that you have. I'm always open to questions.
Yeah. And make sure to join us next week as we dive in to kind of the other side of this. Once you've gotten through the query process and now you're looking into publishers and how to land that deal and how to and how to actually get that publishing deal that you're looking for. So, Amy, thank you so much. As always, we love having you on Debut
Thank
Writers.
you so much, and I love helping other authors get across that finish line. So go revise that query, find some agents that fit your genre that are looking for what you write, and go for it. You got this. Bye, Anne.